wrote a letter to Senator McCain. Senator McCain sent his letter to the National Archives. In his letter, he didn't say I was a councilwoman. He said he had a citizen who wanted to know what happened on March 13th, 1997. And the letter, the whole tone of the letter was like kind of sarcastic. And I found out that when you send something to the National Archives, they don't answer, they file it.
The ultimate, shall we say, insult was the governor of the state of Arizona, Fife Symington, finally calling a news conference saying that he has finally got the answer to the Phoenix Lights, and he introduces some staff member dressed up as a space alien. Give me a break. If we continue to treat this particular issue that way, we are doing a disservice to our children, generations and generations down the road.
Right after his press conference, I started getting so many phone calls. People saying, I can't believe what he did, and, you know, this is serious. And it was very upsetting to a lot of people. And people got very angry because here is the top elected official of the state making fun of what I estimate to be close to probably 10,000 people saw this.
Pay attention to what went on here. Pay attention in particular to the witnesses, the citizens, because the government's not going to provide the answers. Don't lean on the government, don't point the finger, don't go to court, don't waste your time, because they're just doing what they're supposed to be doing. They're trying to preserve the national security. That's their job. It's important that they maintain secrets for our defense, because there's a lot of strife in the world still, a lot of crazy people. We're, of course, in the age of terrorism. So let's not point the fingers at the government. Let's open our arms and our minds and our hearts to the citizens who have extraordinary tales to tell.
When they came out several months later, 5 months later, with the flare explanation, I immediately knew that that's not what we saw.
That was just ridiculous. Flares go down, they don't float across the sky.
Being in the military, I've launched those flares, and they were not flares. As flares fall, you know, up and down, they don't fall. Even in the wind, they don't maintain that altitude.
Not one of my callers ever said that they were in a downward motion or flickering out. They were all the callers, they were traveling. Most of them just saw the lights, 5 to 7 lights. Some of the callers did see the actual V or wedge-shaped craft, and it was a craft, it was not flares.
This is off of the video from Dr. Kitai, and we have the triangle formation again. You know, airplanes dropping flares would have a difficult time getting a perfect triangle time after time.
The flares that the military claimed they dropped on the night of March 13th would be an illumination flare, which would provide light for people on the ground to see what the enemy might be doing.
I do work with flare on a daily basis. They weren't flares. I knew they weren't conventional aircraft. Flares emit smoke, and the illumination from the flare would illuminate the smoke as well, so you would have a trail from the flare leading up.
These lights up here represent aircraft flares. If you notice, they're not in any straight line. They vary in distance between each other. And if you look at the top, you can see the smoke. As the flare falls, it leaves a trail of smoke above it from the burning magnesium in the flare.
Flares are moving relative to each other. They're moving at different speeds. The Phoenix Lights are rock steady.
When you're looking at these points of light, if you were trying to decide, are they part of a large vehicle or are they aircraft flares, what you would look at is the position. In this case, these points of light stay identical in relationship to each other. If they were aircraft flares, they would be dropping slowly and moving laterally back and forth relative to each other.
If I do a histogram of frame 1, frame 100, frame 200, we're running video 30 frames a second. 1,800 frames a minute, so we have almost 6,000 frames. So I take every 100 frames, measure the brightness, see if it's changing. And if we built a graph over time, flares, the graph of the change looks like this. The Phoenix Light, flat graph.
I have footage of these objects from upwards of 20 minutes, so there's no way that it was a flare.
The notion of flares and things was just so absurd once seeing the pictures that you just got it immediately. And I realized it was a manifestation that there was intelligence trying to let us know we're here. Now, let's look at this.
As we had more people come forward through Francis Barwood going public and asking the question, hundreds of people came forward through that, to a great body of case reports we had from Peter Davenport at the National Center. It was clear that I had to do a lot of field work if we were going to even begin to do the animation that we planned to at Village Labs at the outset. Let's try to recreate what went on to properly illustrate what the witnesses were describing.
We've done motion studies of the different witness drawings, the different videos that we had, and built a scientific model that we then turned and moved it in as many positions as we could to find something that was either a formation of lights or lights on some object that no matter how we moved it, it fit with what was on the video and what the witnesses said. This is great to have Dr. Kitai's film, 35 millimeter film that she had shot in addition to the videotape and all the other people's videotapes. We had this high resolution film that I could scan the orbs at 1200 dots per inch and be able to then look at the orbs as a very large object. I can look at the very fine gradations that are out on the edge. I can look frame to frame to frame for changes, or that it's remaining the same. I have more data to deal with. It is my belief that very valuable information comes out of studying the color content of the entire picture and of every single light.
What we're doing is looking at a composite image, an RGB image, and studying the nature of the colors that form that image. And they're not at all the same, you know, it's a real apples and oranges kind of thing.
Yes.
And I think this data is very valid, and I don't know that it can be easily refuted.
When I had the experience of seeing some lights out in the distance, the first thing I did as a, I guess, inborn skeptic myself was just try to run through every possible solution that it could be. I ran my differential diagnosis of anything it could be, and what I realized pretty quickly was nothing fit. Nothing that I could possibly run through. It definitely wasn't flares. It wasn't airplanes. It wasn't streetlights. It wasn't something on the mountain. It wasn't anything that I could think of.
And it also didn't make sense that they were saying it was helicopters flying in formation, because there was no sound. And even the most quiet helicopter still makes a sound.
The key is here is everything we have makes noise. We don't have anything that's quiet. People will say, well, it was stealth. Well, stealth is radar evasive. It has nothing to do with what you hear. It's radar evasive, you know, not sound evasive. And the idea that we saw something that large and that low to the ground that was totally quiet still amazes me.
In my examination of Dr. Lynn's photos and from her description of what happened, they did seem to move as a unit, and they were able to stop and hover. And I'm not aware of any kind of aircraft that has a hovering capability that's silent.
And I don't believe it's the military testing top secret craft. If they were to do such a thing, they would do it out of the public eye, not above a major city.
If our government or a military contractor is making something like this, they made a big mistake in letting it get loose and fly out of control right through the center of Phoenix and air traffic, turn around, flying through military bases.
If this is some sort of secret aircraft by one or more military organizations, they shouldn't be going around having it displayed in Phoenix and having it displayed in Mexico and having it displayed in other parts of the world and then making believe that it's not present. If it's going to be visualized and it's going to be photographed, then people should stand up and own it.
My initial supervisor, when I first arrived here at Luke, he was here in '97 when the incident occurred, and he remembers that 2 jets were scrambled from one of the squadrons on Luke.
Now, as far as I know, nobody ever took a shot at it, except the camera.
We had an insider's report, a ground crewman, who had to help one of the pilots from one of the pairs of jets that went out of his craft because he was so shaken up by it.
One of the pilots stated that they had a visual on it, they've got gun camera film of it, they have no radar tape of it. It scared the hell out of them.
Allegedly, a crewman from Luke Air Force Base called the UFO Reporting Center, Peter Davenport, about 3 a.m. that morning. Very detailed description of this mile-wide triangle